what is the saying? I think it's third shifters do it in the dark. Because I think that was the theme of the weekend, man. F1 went to the other side of the planet, and trying to follow it from the United States was a challenge, let's put it that way, but we managed to do it. This is season 7, episode number 5 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's the 2025 Chinese GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. Are you as sleep deprived as I am, sir?
I'm doing better now. I mean, I didn't even try for the qualifying sessions, man. Like, I just gave up. I was like, I'll see him in the morning. It's fine. I did stay up for the race. I was a little rickety today, but I did have a nice afternoon nap, so we're all good now.
Yeah, I think the theme of my whole week is going to be reset the body clock, because it's kind of weird. Now that we're recording, this is usually when I'm getting up to try to do stuff all weekend. But anyway, we're going to press on through, and we're going to go through a lot of sessions and a lot of twists and turns that happened over the course of this weekend, because it started out one way, ended another way, and then even after the race, there was post-race drama. So we're going to have to get into all of that. But if you have found our show, welcome along as always. You can find us on Blue Sky. We are newly minted over there, as well as X, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course on YouTube right here. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. You can see our link tree to get to all of our content. Do us a solid if you are so inclined, and if you like what you're hearing and you enjoy what you're seeing, you can click the like button on YouTube or the subscribe button. And if you're on your favorite podcasting app, a 5-star review would definitely go a long way to helping our content get to you that much quicker. And we would be most appreciative if you'd like to do that. You can email the show as always, chatnow@outlapf1.com. Thank you so much to our troop of supporters who continue to support the show, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of that troop and support the show with a donation, we would be most appreciative if you'd like to do that. $1, $5, all goes into making the show a little bit better, trying to keep our equipment as up to date as we can. All right, the particulars now out of the way. We will start with our headlines of the day. There's a lot to go through here, man. But Cody, what you got?
I've got F1 Episode 2, The Oscar Strikes Back. You predicted that Oscar Piastri was going to come into this weekend with a vengeance, with a little bit of anger. And if it was there, he didn't show it, but he definitely had the guts and the pace. Had a very, I would say, dominant, very well-managed race performance in the Grand Prix. Wasn't really ever in too much doubt that he was going to bring this one home. I think his only real challenger was Lando, and he just wasn't quite getting there. So, yeah, great race from Oscar. And honestly, I think we're going to see a really good title battle between both McLaren drivers.
And don't count out Max; he's going to be there. I got him. Yeah, don't bet against him 5 times and once more after he's dead, type of thing. My headline of the day is: this shouldn't be so stressful, damn it. But a late, wonky brake issue for Lando made me again, at the end of the race, instead of jumping for joy, just say, phew, because I thought we were going to have another disaster again. But all that being said, what a McLaren car this team has put together, and McLaren fans who have endured a lot of lean years over the long haul. We need to enjoy this ride, even if it is stressful, because you never know when it's going to come again. So I'm going to ride this roller coaster all freaking year, and I am all about it. And then post-race, all holy hell broke loose. We're going to talk about all of the post-race drama and drivers getting thrown out, and one whole team who was not classified at the end of this race because both their drivers were kicked out in post-race scrutineering. So we will talk about all of that. Oh my goodness. But we have to first rewind and go all the way back to, I think it was Thursday night, Friday morning. The sprint qualifying kicked off, and that was our first official session. If I can actually get it onto my screen, that would be helpful. All right, we actually do have the sound. That wasn't the problem. I wasn't stalling for the sound. The sound's all ready to go. But, all right, the sprint qualifying saw All right, going out in P20, and this was the beginning of, I would just say, the house of pain for this poor guy. Going to be under pressure now like never before. Liam Lawson in the Red Bull, unable to get anything better than the bottom of the grid. P19 was Nico Hulkenberg. P18, Esteban Ocon. P17 was Pierre Gasly. P16 was Jack Doohan. Moving into Q2, but going no farther. P15 saw Isaac Hadjar. P14 was Gabriel Bortoletto, the surprising form from the Kick Sauber there. P13, Carlos Sainz. P12, Oliver Behrman in the Haas. Already a much better weekend than the entirety of Australia for him. P11 was Fernando Alonso. And P10 was Lance Stroll. P9 was Alex Albon. P8, Yuki Tsunoda, Racing Bulls looking strong early. P7, Kimi Antonelli, not looking very much like a rookie right now. P6, probably a shocker of qualifying if you ask me to have him down the way down here. Talk about why. That was Lando Norris in the McLaren. P5 was George Russell. P4 was Charles Leclerc. P3, the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri. That was all they could do, despite being the front runners early. P2 was Max Verstappen. Told me you can't count this guy out. And P1, he's not done. Not done by any stretch. Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari on debut, almost on debut, secures his first pole in only his second race. All right, Cody, lots to talk about here early in the sprint quali.
Oh, Liam. This is not a good start for him. Really rough Australia. You give him the benefit of the doubt there because it's his first race in that car. You have the wet weather on Sunday. It was very hot on Saturday for qualifying. There was a lot to go wrong. This one was a lot more straightforward, and except for the fact, I suppose, that you only have the one practice session before you go into the sprint qualifying format. But still, P20, tricky car or not, that does not look good. I thought it was too early to start harping on him before, but now, no, might be a little warranted.
The vultures are definitely circling. It's not just you. Yeah, that was tough to explain while you're behind both Kick Saubers, both Haas's, and both Alpines in a car that conceivably should at least be in the top four. At a minimum, you should be qualifying probably 8th or 9th. So yeah, the pressure is definitely on one Liam Lawson. He's not blaming anybody but himself. I thought it was a stand-up guy in all the interviews that he did, but you can be as stand-up as you want. Eventually, the results are going to have to come. And Helmut Marko is circling, and Christian Horner's being intentionally vague in the responses he's giving. And, we'll talk about it post-race. There's an Autosport report that says we may see some Red Bull shuffling act even as early as potentially the next GP, which would be a shock for sure. But, yeah, definitely not a good start to the weekend for Liam Lawson. Surprises in other places. Well, let's just look at pole position. Lewis Hamilton. If you thought the Ferrari form was off in Australia, that was a fair assessment. It probably didn't look as good as what we thought coming out of testing. They obviously fixed it, at least in the early part of the weekend, because, they went out, new surface and all, and just kind of blitzed the field. And Hamilton putting together a hell of a lap in SQ3 to get on pole, narrowly beating out Max Verstappen, who I thought had dragged the car as far as he possibly could. And both McLaren cars having a bit of trickiness issues over the course of the lap, where most of the lap they were clearly ahead, and then something would happen. There would be a snap. There would be some sort of understeer, massive oversteer. The hairpin just before the end of the lap was a big problem spot, particularly for Lando Norris. And he did not even set a second run in SQ3. And his first run was all he could do, and it only managed to get him P6. So a bit on the back foot for Lando there. Oscar with a better lap, but still not good enough to challenge the top two. So yeah, for what we thought was going to be just McLaren walking away with it early, certainly not the case.
Yeah, it definitely gave me a little hope after the sprint qualifying session. Obviously, your top two guys at the front there, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, are renowned for being able to extract the very most out of the car, especially probably with limited track running before the sprint format, is going to play to their skill set. Definitely gave some hope to Ferrari fans for at least the first part of the weekend. It was really cool to see, Lewis out there, waving to the crowd and everyone being super excited. It looks like he has a lot of fans in China, so that was really good to see. The McLaren, as you said, does look tricky, and I think at least Lando Norris was saying that even in Australia that the car is really fast, but it's a bit tricky. And I got to wonder if they're almost kind of going the same direction as, the Red Bull. We've seen the Red Bull for several years now where it's like, ooh, yeah, that car looks really tricky to drive. Only Max can handle it. And it kind of almost seems like McLaren at this point is going the same direction where they're like, okay, we can squeeze even more out of this car to make it go the very fastest, but you have to be able to really nail it on that one lap to get everything out of it.
Yeah, and I thought Lando was actually very open and honest in his post qualifying comments where he said, "Look, I was probably going 98 to 100% pace. I probably only really needed to do 95, and the car would have probably got me there anyway." Because it's very stiff. It's very stiff in the suspension, and that means that when it's trying to jink around some of these corners, it can be a little snappy. And that's what I saw, I think, basically from both drivers, where especially even in Sector 3, which, in Australia, Sector 3, they were so good in. And you generally think, well, okay, if they could just maybe, get through the first two sectors, Sector 3 should be really good for them too. When they could nail the lap, that was absolutely the case. But when they would have a snap, depending on the snap and where it was, I mean, Lando's was in the hairpin. It took him all four wheels off the track, so he didn't even bother to complete the second lap because he knew it was going to get deleted anyway. So, we'll never know really where that second lap would have fallen. But yeah, I mean, it's a tricky car in certain conditions. It was much warmer on the sprint qualifying than necessarily the Grand Prix qualifying. And we had that new surface that was still very much evolving. And I think back to races like Coda last year that had a lot of new surface. And that's where the Ferraris seem to have, especially early, they have on a newer racetrack, that seems to be their sweet spot. So kudos to them for getting on it early. All right, so then we moved into the sprint Friday night or Saturday morning, as you were, and it wasn't the best of sprints, let's be honest. It didn't have a ton of overtaking, but we will take you through the finishing order and where it was. But I imagine for a lot of people, this was a very popular result. Let's put it that way. So P20, that was Jack Doohan in the Alpine. P19 was Nico Hulkenberg. P18, Gabriel Bortoleto. P17, Carlos Sainz in the Williams. That was probably not where we expected him to be. P16 was Esteban Ocon. P15, Ali Behrman. P14 was Liam Lawson. P13 was Isaac Hadjar. P12, Pierre Gasly. P11 was Alex Albon. P10 was Fernando Alonso. Just missing out on the points was Lance Stroll. P8 just being in the points was Lando Norris. We will explain how that happened. P7 was Kimi Antonelli. P6, Yuki Tsunoda. Again, Racing Bulls looking pretty good. P5 was Charles Leclerc. P4 was George Russell. P3, Max Verstappen. P2 was Oscar Piastri. And in P1, he got it off the line really well and managed those tires all the way to the end. Lewis Hamilton, in only his second race in Ferrari, gets a victory. It's not a full GP victory, but it is a victory nonetheless. Whenever you line 20 cars up and you're the first guy, that's a good result. Hell of a drive there by Lewis.
Yeah, very well managed. We saw during the sprint race that the new track surface, as expected, was very grippy, but very rough on the tires. Everyone was running medium tires to try to do just like one stint for the whole thing, and they dropped off really quickly. We kind of saw the same thing with Max Verstappen as we saw in Australia, where he was trying to keep up with Lewis for a while and was mostly keeping up with him, staying within DRS range, but eventually that dirty air and track surface caught up to him and the tires wore down, and kind of disappointed he wasn't able to hold on to second place. Eventually Oscar Piastri did catch up and get by him, which, disappointing for me, but definitely shows that McLaren is the very strong car. But yeah, very, very well managed by Lewis. He managed to to make those medium tires work pretty well throughout the entire stint. Continued to give promise to Ferrari fans, thinking that maybe Australia was a fluke and maybe they're actually a lot better off than we expected based on that, and that maybe they're going to be in the hunt. And yeah, it might have been just a flash in the pan.
We'll talk about that.
Well, what a flash it was.
Yes, and this is just something I want to caution. If you're a newer fan to F1, I don't know if it's just the sprint format that brings this out, or if it was because it was Lewis, if it was because it was Ferrari. It's probably a combination of all of it. The amount of reaction, and I would almost say overreaction to a sprint result, was a lot to deal with across all sorts of social media, from people making declarative statements like, this is championship number 8 in the bag, to, oh my God, it only took him 2 races and he's already winning. And, to, look how quickly, he shut all the critics up, and he did shut the critics up. I mean, if you had critique of him from what you saw in Australia, at this point, he was shutting them up and he was doing a great job. But it's one session on one tire at a track that is very unique. It's the only time they run here, and a track surface that is also still going under a lot of evolution too. So, let's all take this as a good thing. Like, hey, it was a great moment. I thought, Lewis looked amazing and he clearly controlled it from the front. It also told everybody pole position for the main race was going to matter a lot, because if you could get the clean air, you were significantly better on your tires than almost anybody else. And Oscar does get by Max with about 5 laps to go, but he had nothing for Lewis. I mean, I think at that point the gap was like 3 seconds, and it finished almost 7. So, I mean, Lewis continued just to be able to manage the tire in the clean air. He was in the preferred position. He knows how to close. He hasn't forgotten how to do that. We know that for sure. But all I would say is let's tone down the crazy narratives that were coming out of a 19-lap sprint. Oh my God. On the not so good end of the sprint, I would say, was one Lando Norris, who started 6th, had a moment where I guess he put a tire in the grass on the first lap, and that enabled 3 cars to get around him. Rode around for a good chunk in P9, couldn't really do anything. I mean, you talk about the dirty air. He was stuck in dirty air, and even if you have the fastest car and you're stuck in that dirty air, you were not going anywhere. Also, it looked like the DAG was pretty much even across that part of the field where he was in, so he wasn't able to get a tire offset or anything. He did manage to get by Stroll late. He was coming up on Antonelli very, very late, so maybe there was some McLaren magic at the very, very end, but not enough to really do much. But it's a point. He actually maintained his lead in the drivers by 2 points at this point, because Max pulled back of the 7 he lost. He pulled back 5 of them. So, at this point, it was very, very tight, and McLaren had eked out a 1-point lead on Mercedes in the constructors at this point as well. So, certainly not the start to the weekend that I think a lot of people who, were saying McLaren were clearly the fastest car, certainly, I mean, good result for Oscar getting P2, but it was telling to see how much Lando seemed to be struggling.
Yeah, it was a rough one for him. Just a little mistake at the beginning of the race cost him, and like you said, even with how good that car is, being in the dirty air was a big effect. High tire drag was a big effect, and that is just that much worse when you're in dirty air. So even with that car, he only managed to fight back to get 1 point, but 1 point is 1 point, so it's better than a kick in the rear.
I guess that's true. But the good news was, if you were a McLaren or a Lando fan, or if you were anybody else who didn't necessarily have a good sprint, you could make changes to your car, and you had a whole nother go a few hours later down the line in the main GP qualifying. And that main GP qualifying saw the following. All right, the House of Pain continues for one Liam Lawson, as he can only put it in P20. Ouch. P19, Gabriel Bortoletto. P18 was Jack Doohan. P17 was Ali Behrman. P16 was Pierre Gasly. P15, he did make it to Q2, but didn't make it any further. Carlos Sainz, as his weekend of struggles appeared to continue. P14 was Lance Stroll. P13, Fernando Alonso. P12, one of the my little stars of qualifying here, Nico Hulkenberg in the Kick Sauber. Look at that. P11, the other star of qualifying, if you ask me, Esteban Ocon in the Haas. Where did that come from? P10, Alex Albon making Q3. There's Williams in Q3 again. So midfield teams all getting closer and stepping up. P9, Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bull. P8, Kimi Antonelli. P7, Isaac Hadjar in the other Racing Bull. Look at that. P6 was Charles Leclerc. P5 was Lewis Hamilton. P4 was Max Verstappen. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 with a great lap at the very, very end of qualifying to get there. George Russell in the Mercedes. But in P1, pissed off Oscar Piastri makes things happen. He takes pole position, his first pole position in Formula One for a main GP with a lap time of 1 minute 30.641. All right. Cody, big thoughts in the main GP qualifying.
We didn't get any better. Yeah, at this point I was feeling the pain, being like, oh no, like everything that we worried could happen is happening. Is when we first started hearing the rumblings of people saying like, he's not even going to make it to Japan in this car. And I was like, at this point I kind of believe it. And from what we heard after the race, that could actually happen. It is going to be Yuki Tsunoda's home race. Be a great time to give him the opportunity that, let's be real, he's probably deserved for a long time and has been shafted. I don't think that, even if that happens, I don't think they're like kicking Liam to the curb. He would probably just go back to the Racing Bulls seat for now. But off to a very, very rocky start, way off of Max. And Max didn't even have, super great qualifying this time around. It looks like everyone else made improvements to the car for the main qualifying, and we saw the McLarens go back up to the front like we expected. Fantastic qualifying from George Russell. He is really kind of flying under the radar over these first couple races because he's not really gotten a whole lot of camera time. He's really kind of been out there just doing his own thing. But he finished third place in Australia. He qualified very well here. He got some good points, fourth place in the sprint. Like he's definitely there, and he is really showing his leadership at that Mercedes team right now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were a couple radio transmissions, and again, they always get cherry picked, so we always got to take this with a grain of salt. But I thought they did a good job of it was a transmission where he was kind of telling everybody, look, we tried this, we realized it didn't work, so let's just go back. Everybody stay calm. Should be okay. And he even confessed, like, we basically threw everything and the kitchen sink at the car, and the last thing we tried worked. So that's how he ended up there. A great lap at the end to keep it together, literally at the death when it looked like it was going to be a McLaren 1-2 in quali, because Lando had gotten better, but again, he had a mistake again in that hairpin on his last qualifying lap. So he had to go on his first time, which was not, certainly nothing to sneeze at. A 130.7 was really good, and at the time was close to the track record. And then Russell and Piastri kind of blew it out of the water with their respective efforts on their last laps there. So they were the only two, I think, of basically everybody in Q3 who really improved on their second run, because we saw. Max didn't really improve on his second run, and neither did the Ferraris, and neither did anybody else really. So, I mean, of the people who got faster, they were rewarded because they got P1 and P2 there. So we will. Any other thing to talk about in qualifying before I move on?
Just that the Ferraris kind of ended up back where we were maybe expecting them to be, which was disappointing, but kind of brought everyone back down to earth, I think, on their expectations. Really good qualifying performance from Isaac Hadjar. Out-qualified Yuki Tsunoda for the first time, well within the top 10. The Racing Bulls car looks pretty good, and as we're going to get into during the race here, Perhaps right now they're being held back by strategy more than the car or the drivers at the moment. But it is really good to see that Isaac Hadjar is bouncing back here after the non-race that he had in Australia. That could have really been a major blow to his confidence. Probably was, but he is bouncing back and showing that he deserves to be here. He deserves the shot he's been given.
Yeah, I think the best thing for him was he didn't have more than a couple days to really have to dwell on that. It's good that he didn't have like a 2 or 3 week break in between races, to where that thing could kind of fester and, Lord only knows what it does. But the fact that he was able to get back in the car and be quick kind of can put, his Australian nightmare to bed as quickly as he can. And that's good for him. And again, I think I saw a couple times even Anthony Hamilton back in the paddock, giving congratulations to him after qualifying. So that was also pretty good. Anthony Hamilton's being like a mentor to a bunch of people. I saw a lot of people talking to him over the course of the weekend in the paddock there. So the old sage. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And it's pretty cool that he's willing and able to do that. He doesn't necessarily have to talk to anybody, but it's a cool thing that he's doing that. So yeah, I think kind of if we kind of reset where we all kind of thought we were after testing, this kind of felt more like it. If I'm being honest, at least about with the ordering of things. But yeah, good performance by the Racing Bulls. Impressed that Haas were able to do some things to get Ocon all the way up to P11. Behrman P17, not great, but we can kind of understand why he had like 4 laps in Australia before the race. So, at least he was able to have a clean weekend up till this point. And so Haas making some good progress there. Kind of surprising to see Carlos Sainz go back. Only P15. That was a bit of a surprise for me. But Alex Albon, obviously Carlos Sainz has awoken something in one Alex Albon because he's bringing everything he's got. And that's a good thing for Williams because they need the contribution. So good showing to make Q3 yet again. All right, so we will flip over to the Sunday race. And we normally would start with the back markers, but the back markers have 3 candidates here that, well, we might as well just get the suspense out of where we're going. Post-race, after a race that we kind of thought was done, dusted, I had been up for a very long time and made it through all the post-race stuff and figured I was okay to finally go to bed. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Post-race technical inspections revealed the following, that 2 cars had been found to be underweight, and those were car 16 of Charles Leclerc and car 10 of Pierre Gasly, that although their initial weigh-in, they were okay, they were on the weight limit of 800 kilograms when the fuel was removed, and they did a dry weigh-in. They were both at 799 kgs, which is not enough, and therefore both of those cars were disqualified. And then about a half an hour later, we learned that yet another car was subject to a different disqualification, that being the other Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton, who had rear plank wear that was a bit too much, not by a whole lot, but enough to be technically outside of the rules, and he was disqualified as well. All right, so we had those 3. They were basically never there on Sunday, but they were there, and we will talk about some of what they did, but that's where they ended up. No points for any of them. P not classified was the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, who only managed to make 4 laps before he had to retire with a brake failure. So maybe a foreshadowing of things to come. P16, Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bull. We will talk about how he fell all the way down there. Also had a weird equipment failure, that's something you almost never see, and people had to go back and rewatch the video to make sure that it happened the way that we all thought it did. P15 was Nico Hulkenberg in the Kick Sauber. P14 was Gabriel Bortoletto, the other Kick Sauber, and P13 was Jack Doohan in the Alpine. All right, I guess we should talk about the DQs first. Cody, where do you want to start?
Probably with the Ferraris, because they actually had some interest in the race. I think Pierre Gasly's race was kind of, not really super in your face, kind of under the radar. I don't think he was even finishing in the points anyway.
No, he wouldn't have been in
his
the points.
Disqualification,
Yeah,
really is just more of a pain than anything else. But those Ferraris would have finished in the points. It would have, gotten a fairly decent sum considering where they were in Australia, and yet now they're coming out of this still with very little to show for it. Charles Leclerc had damage to his wing, his front wing, caused by Lewis Hamilton very early on in the race, and we all thought, oh man, he's going to be in trouble. He's going to have to come in and switch the nose. And what ended up happening was very strange. His pace didn't get any worse. In fact, he seemed to be doing really well. Despite missing the end plate on his front wing, he was keeping up with Lewis Hamilton to the point where they didn't switch out the nose when he came in for his pit stop. And there were team orders for him to swap positions with Lewis Hamilton on track. The commentators were saying that, he's probably going to be screwed. His team came over the radio and said, you're going to be losing this many points at downforce. That's not good. That's a lot. And really didn't seem to actually make much of a difference for whatever reason. Lewis Hamilton was definitely not looking as strong today. Late in the race, they ended up pitting him again to try to get some fresh tires to see if it would be worth it, splitting up that strategy, and just didn't work out for him. He was gaining on, I believe it was Max Verstappen, right? Yep. He was gaining on Max Verstappen, but just not at a rate quick enough to actually catch him. So really too bad that they got disqualified, but those be the rules. So even if you miss it by that much, the rule is absolute, and it says you are disqualified.
Yeah, it's what I like to call the little rule of the little book of big consequences, because the technical regulations are not to be violated. And we've seen it before. We've seen George Russell thrown out of a race for tire wear. We've seen Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc kicked out of a race at COTA that we were at for plank wear, and the same thing. And we were talking about this even before we got on. That, here it is again. Here's another sprint. Here's another instance where the plank apparently is under a lot more stress in a sprint weekend than it would be, with traditional FP1, FP2, FP3. A lot more qualifying sessions, a lot more downforce running through the car, harder laps, more wear, all of that. And I guess it just takes a grind. And if your car is such that you are trying to reap every little bit of downforce out of it, which all these cars being ground effect cars, that's what they're designed to do. It's kind of surprising we haven't seen more of this, but here it is yet again. Not anybody's fault. Ferrari issued a statement. They were clear. This is clearly not an attempt to try to cheat or circumvent the rules. We did go into the weekend with all the technical directive about all the wing stuff. That proved to be the back seat issue. In fact, all the teams that had to change were none of the ones that we all thought. It turned out to be Alpine and Haas and maybe one other that had to change their wings. But any of the major players, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, no, they all passed without any issues or any special parts needed on their rear wings. So, but here is the issue that ends up carrying a lot of weight. As for the other part was, it wasn't, when Russell got disqualified, it was because, they went on a one stop and the tire, they literally didn't have a chance to pick up extra of that, clag at the end of the race to make the car pass. Here, they all had that opportunity. They had a full lap to do that. So I don't know what happened between the sprint and qualifying and the race, because they obviously all passed the scrutineering and qualifying. But something happened to the Ferrari. And just to clarify, it was not the front wing that caused that car to be underweight. They were able to swap out in the test and put on a brand new, clean, unbiased rear wing that had all the parts to it. So the car was not underweight because they lost a bit from the rear wing, and that's not what caused it. What has caused it, they haven't said yet. I don't think that's been released. But we ended up with both Ferraris out of the race and Pierre Gasly out of the race as well.
Mm-hmm. Fernando Alonso retires very early with a brake issue. It was caught very early by people driving around him who said, "Hey, your brakes are on fire." So his race was screwed right off the bat. Fernando Alonso having a really tough start to the year so far. Not really anything to show for it. Crashed in Australia. Tired here very early in the race. So, yeah, rough for him. Yuki Tsunoda looked like he had a real good thing going for him based on his, qualifying and pace here throughout the weekend. However, it was not to be. I think they kind of put him on a bit of a poor strategy because didn't he do 2 stops?
Well, it was a strategy that if you were to ask everybody at the beginning of the race, was a 2-stopper a bad idea? I don't think anybody would have said no, because it was almost assured that we were going to see a 2-stop race, especially after we saw all of the dag in the sprint on the medium tire. However, nobody, and I do mean all 20 drivers, no one had run the hard tire until Sunday. It's just kind of how these sprints tend to go. But nobody took a home run on the hard tire. They probably would have looked like a genius in the sprint had someone tried it, as it turns out, because the hard tire turned out to be a lot more durable than anybody thought. Now, this was a new tire developed by Pirelli. So this was the C2, and nobody really ran it in testing. They obviously didn't run it in Melbourne because that's a street track where you were on C3, C4, C5. So this was the first chance to see the C2 hard tire, and it didn't give up. It just kept on going. Lance Stroll did, I think, 36 laps on an opening stint that I don't think anybody saw coming. And basically, the vast majority of runners ran about 15 laps or so on the medium tire. They swapped out for the hard, and most of them went to the end of the race on the hard tire, with the exception of the Racing Bulls, who had pretty much committed to their 2-stop strategy and thought that it was going to work. And they thought they were going to pull the pin on everybody with the second stop, and nobody followed them in. So that ended up, they were looking good. They had good pace. Their pace when they were on the second set of hard tires was actually really good. I think they were swapping out fastest laps at one point. But it was not to be. And that's why Yuki Tsunoda ends up P16. The other reason Yuki Tsunoda was down in P16 is his front wing just flat out failed. On the long straightaway, it was not a point of contact. He was by himself, and the front wing said, I don't want to play anymore, and broke.
Yeah, so, it was very strange looking. It was like a very straight break, right at kind of like a junction point on those elements. And yeah, they showed the replay, and it pretty much just wibble wobbling in the dirty air from the car in front, and all of a sudden just snaps from nothing. No debris or anything like that. So a bit of a strange failure. Really, really put the final nail in the coffin of his race, which is too bad. He's racing out there trying to fight for that Red Bull seat, and he looks like he's got a fantastic shot to fight for it, but just doesn't have as much to show for it as he perhaps should.
Well, I think it's going to come down to his qualifying form is looking a lot better than the guy in the Red Bull seats right now. I don't think they're going to try to add up all of the points that they each have. But all right, well, so we'll see kind of where that goes, and we'll talk about the Autosport report when we kind of get done with the race as well. All right, so now moving into the midfield, P12 was that aforementioned Liam Lawson, who moves up 3 positions because of all of the DQs there. P11 was Isaac Hadjar. P10 was Carlos Sainz, so he ends up benefiting from the DQs and gets a point here. P9, Lance Stroll, he gets 2 points because of the DQs. P8 was Ali Behrman. So Haas not only scored, but scored pretty darn good. P7 was Alex Albon. P6, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. And P5, Esteban Ocon. Yes, he moves up 3 positions because of the DQs, but that's still a Haas with double-digit points, especially after last week. That's a heck of a rally. Let's put it that way. And then P4, getting, again, what I thought he absolutely could, given what his car was doing, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. All right, Cody, big thoughts here in the midfield.
I'll start with Max. He did drop down a few positions at the very beginning of the race, and it looked like that might be where he was going to be to stay. However, at the later stages of the race on the hard tire, he found a little something extra and did manage to actually fight back up into P4, which was about as good as I could have hoped for. I didn't think he was going to get near the podium this time, so just missing out on it keeps him very close in the running as far as the driver standings points goes. So like I said, for what the car is doing right now, probably about the best we could have hoped for. It does give me hope that if they can squeeze some more pace out of that car, just overall pace, that he will be right back into the championship fight. Problem is can they do that before McLaren continues to squeeze more performance out of their car? Whereas the performance ceilings on these is going to be a big talking point as the season goes on. And yeah, big comeback from Haas. Haas looked awful in Australia. They were nowhere, finished way at the back. They didn't really seem to know what was going on. And then, yeah, in this race, albeit assisted by the disqualifications, but still there to claim it nonetheless. Yeah, very strong performance by Esteban Ocon for that P5 and Oliver Bearman looking like the very promising rookie right now. Probably, I would say, the next best next to one Kimi Antonelli, who also benefits from those disqualifications, gets in the P6. Definitely not quite up to snuff with George Russell quite yet, but he's brand new in F1, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. He is performing very, very well for a rookie. Got driver of the day. I'm not sure that he really quite deserved that in my eyes, but he's definitely got a fan club going.
You mean somebody in Italy was doing the whole click farm bit?
Something, but yeah, I can't say that he doesn't deserve consideration because he ran a solid race. He kept it out of trouble. Would have been 8 on the road, but ended up benefiting from those Ferrari disqualifications. So yeah, 6th place, great showing from him.
Yeah, certainly nothing to sneeze at. I don't know. I take kind of the driver of the day award that the fans do with a grain of salt because you got to get it in by the end of the race. And sometimes you really don't even know what you know until later. So you could have cast your vote and had your driver disqualified today. So, you never know where that's going to go, but fine. Like to me, it was okay, but good for him. A good, solid, uneventful, like if you're one of the 6 rookies, I think most of them got what they needed in the second round that they didn't get necessarily in the first round because it was such changing, tricky conditions where, you got laps in, you had a nice solid performance, you showed a bit of form, and you kind of kept your nose clean. I thought some of the overtakes that Ollie Bearman did were amazing. I love the fact that he now has a signature saying "ciao" as he's going by. So wait for the memes for that one. Just you wait, you're going to see that, I guarantee you. Yeah, I thought all of the rookies played a lot better. Everybody, unfortunately the kick salvers were kind of back to where we thought they were going to be. So we didn't see a whole lot from Bortoletto. But Doohan kept his nose clean, which is big for him. Hadjar looked good, and so did Tsunoda looked good in the Racing Bulls. So yeah, the young kids, I think, were doing pretty good today, all things considered.
Yeah. Last one I've got for the midfield here is Alex Albon showing everybody, hey, this is my house.
Yep.
The Williams finishes 7th. Great run from him. Very well managed from him with the tires as well. Did come over the radio at one point and say, yeah, I'm doing better than everybody else. Leap to it in so many words, which was really fun to hear. And he even led the race at one point, which was also pretty fun to see. Yeah, it just, I think a lot of people were expecting it to be a lot closer fight in the beginning here between Carlos Sainz and Albon. And let's be real, Carlos Sainz is in a new team. It's going to always take some time to get used to it, even if you are as well seasoned as he is. But there was a lot of wonder as to how good is Albon really, because his teammates have not been particularly strong over the last few years. Now we've got him up against somebody who is a proven race winner, veteran of the sport, and at least for the moment, he's showing him up. So we'll just have to see where this goes. But I do think he is very impressive at the moment.
Yeah, and I think competition between those two is a good thing. And the fact that Carlos Sainz came in and is now pushing Albon, and he's even admitted it. Even in the first couple of weeks where he said, I would always try to push myself, but I was not being pushed. Now I'm being pushed, and now I have to not only push myself, but I'm also being physically pushed with form from other guys. on my own team now. So, and hopefully that means that the talent that we've all thought was always there for Albon is going to come out. And, the fact that the car is also improving is a very good sign. I think if you're a Williams fan, I keep saying, watch this team in a couple years. They may be the dark horse to come out of nowhere in the 26 regs and nail something, especially early, because they're already putting their resources to that, and they've already said that. So, but it's nice to see Williams being competitive and being on form with certainly with Alex Albon. All right, so moving into the podium, there wasn't too much podium drama. Actually, this was a very controlled race from the front, except at the very, very end. P3 turned out to be George Russell. P2 was Lando Norris, who hung on in spite of a brake problem. Whether or not it was the exact same problem that befuddled one Fernando Alonso, we don't know yet. But it got a lot closer than the only second and a half difference between P2 and P3 would indicate. But P1, he got the clean air off the start and was pretty much gone, and that was the last you saw of him. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. McLaren won to their 50th as a constructor. Cody, thoughts on the podium?
I think I'm going to leave Oscar and Lando to you, except to say that I thought that their 1-2 was very well deserved. In fact, I think pretty much everyone on the podium here was pretty well deserved. George Russell, as discussed in the qualifying and in Australia, pretty quiet race, kind of out there on his own for a lot of it. Did have some good moves. Ultimately, that Mercedes does not have the pace at the moment to keep up with McLaren. However, it does look like they have taken a step over last year. The car seems to be a lot more consistent so far. Last year, it was really only getting particularly strong performances in niche conditions or at particular tracks. And so far, we're seeing that they can do better than that. So George Russell finishes third 2 Grand Prix in a row, which keeps him very well in the running on points. I think he's actually tied with Max on points right now. The tiebreaker going to Max at the moment because he's had a second place finish. But it just goes to show that they are there. And just like Red Bull, if they manage to find something to squeeze a little more performance out of that, they could get into the running still at this point. However, for now, it is still McLaren's to lose.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with George is I just keep saying, like, oh, hi, I'm here. If y'all forgot, my name is George, and I finished on the podium. And and I thought he was able to keep pace for a good amount of the stint. It wasn't until the last, I would say, third of the stint where, the McLarens were able to kind of lift their pace because they wanted to, and then weren't trying to be in super tire conservation mode and opened up the gap. And as it turned out, that gap turned out to be really significant because while Oscar Piastri had a great start, and look, if Lando Norris wants to learn how to do a start, watch his teammate, because that's how you do it. He did not get the greatest get off the line, but it didn't matter because of where he positioned the car. He dictated what was going to happen to George Russell going into that first turn. And he was good. He made Russell make the decision. You're either going to pull out or you're going to stay in it. And if you stay in it, you're probably not going to like the result that if you do. So that's how you dictate the start. We've talked about this a lot of times with Lando. As much as I am a fan of his, where he has problems is sometimes he gets the start dictated to him by others. So that's still something I still think he needs to kind of work on a little bit. But again, Oscar got into the clean air, pretty much stayed there. Lando kept kind of rubbering back and forth throughout the course of the race, where he'd get kind of close to Oscar and then kind of get into the dirty air. A couple times he just wanted Oscar to speed up a little bit more, and then they did. There was a call that came down that said, okay, stop conserving the tires. We want to open up the gap to the Mercedes, to George. And they did. And it proved to be pivotal because not only was it potentially, if they were still possibly going to do a 2-stop, covering off an undercut, because on the 1 stop that did happen, Russell did get back around Lando, and Lando had to make a nice move down the straight to take P2 back. But at the end of the race, with about 5 laps to go, all of a sudden Lando comes on the radio and says, my brake feels long, meaning that I'm pushing on the brake and it's not doing what I think it's going to do. And it just doesn't feel right. It feels more spongy. And it went from a problem where they were dealing with it, and it didn't sound, and it almost said, yeah, this is boring, but this is what's going to happen, to 2 laps to go. All of a sudden, well, Joseph comes on and says, the brake thing is now critical. And that's McLaren speak for, oh shit. Lack of a better term. There's a lot of McLaren codes that are out there. Critical usually means that's a problem. There's a lot of stuff that they tell the drivers throughout the course of the race that are usually minor. Change this balance over here, move that brake balance, move this engine mode, do whatever. When they say critical, that means shut up and listen, because this is important, because we don't think you're going to have brakes by the end of this thing. So the nice cushy 8-second lead that he had on George with 2 laps to go, all of a sudden erodes very, very quickly, with Lando now trying to nurse his car to get home. And I think it got down to 1.5 seconds at the line. Thank God there was a lap car in between the two of them, because this was the second race in a row where I'm looking at Lando and I'm going, just get to the line. Just please get to the goddamn line. And then he gets there, and I just, not elation, but relief, because of what could have happened badly. Because I think if there's 2 more laps, he may have even DNF'd, because it looked like it was just getting worse and worse and worse.
It was really funny to hear how the team radio changed in tone as it progressed, because at first they were like, Lando's coming over and he's like, yeah, the brake feels like it's a little long, it's spongy. It feels like he's pushing his foot further in. And the team's telling him, okay, we acknowledge that that's happening, but it's not going to affect your brake pressure. If anyone who doesn't know, Formula One cars work on what's called brake by wire, which is to say that there isn't like a physical brake connection between your pedal and the actual brake system. It's electronics. So you might be pushing on the pedal harder, but as long as that signal's still going through,
it's either on or off. There's not a layer of it. It's either the brake is on or the brake is off.
Yeah. So you figure, okay, yeah, maybe your brake pressure feels weird, but as long as that signal's going through, you're getting your full brakes. And then it changed to, okay, Lando, this problem is going to get progressively worse. It's going to get longer by, I think they were saying something like 0.5 millimeter, like every lap, which over the course of many laps is really going to add up and feel strange. And commentators were saying, look, even like 0.5 millimeter, driver's going to feel, because they are so well tuned to the car, they're going to notice teeny tiny changes like that. But they said it was just going to keep getting worse, but that it still shouldn't affect the brakes pressure, at least, that he's just going to have to deal with it, and he should be able to make it home. And then, as you said, leading into the last few laps, they're like, okay, this problem is like becoming critical, manage it, bring it home. And I watched that gap between him and Russell shrink so quickly over those last 2 laps, and I was thinking, oh my God, he might not actually finish in second at the very least, or might not even be able to make it to the end, which he did, which is great. But had there been even just 1 more lap, he might have been in some serious trouble. Fortunately, car lasts long enough for him to get home in P2, which is what I think he really deserved out of this race.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we ever would have. It would have been interesting. Well, there's part of me that would say it would have been interesting to see had he been able to try to actually be able to mount a challenge towards Oscar, because every time he seemed to get close, he'd back off, or again, he had the brake problem late. And even though he was trying to go through the brake problem, I think he got to within like 2.7 seconds, and then they told him critical, and that's when he, then fully backed off, and then used every bit of the 8 seconds that he had to George Russell to just get the car home. But I mean, I thought from where he started the weekend, especially in the sprint qualifying, where he kind of botched the last lap and he starts P6 and then he has the bad sprint. It felt a lot like, I would say Lando's weekend felt more like a pitcher who didn't have his best stuff on the mound type of thing, where he was just trying to figure out how to work through that problem. And the fact that he managed to get home in P2, again, I think is another step in the evolution of, okay, the car can be great, but when the car is fidgety and fighty and you're fighting it, how do you work through that? Which is one of the things that Max is so great at. I'm sure that there was lots of times in that dominant 2023 season where he was thinking maybe the car isn't doing what I want to do, but he would just manage it so well you never noticed. So it was kind of like that was what I wanted him to get out of this race. So I'm very happy he came home. I'm very happy the brakes held out long enough. And also happy it didn't fricking rain, because then they came on the radio and said there might be a rain with the last lap. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding? Now we're going to do this again. So the stress watch of a McLaren fan, even with the fastest car, even with a 1-2, it's never easy. These guys don't make it easy on your ticker. Let's put it that way. So, whew, we got it. But it's damn fun to watch.
Yeah. And through all this, we really haven't even mentioned Oscar too much, because there's not really too much to say. He got the lead. He held the lead, managed the race very well. There was a couple points where Lando was starting to catch up to him a little bit. And if I might give Lando just a small critique through all this, I think he needs to get that, I don't even know the right way to say it other than a heartless competitor bit going in him, because there was a part where the team was like, hey, you can speed it up a little, catch up to Oscar, and he's like, yeah, but I don't want to get into like his dirty air. And I kind of was thinking from that, I'm like, okay, yeah, that might hurt your performance a little bit, but you're not really at risk anymore of like falling back into Russell. Like, don't you want to go for it and try it and, I don't know, see if you can do it? I don't know. I just feel like had that been, like a battle between, I don't know, Lewis and Valtteri Bottas, I think Lewis would have gone for it. So I think he needs to get more of that. Like, I have to go for the win no matter what, in order to bring it home at the end of the year.
Yeah, it sounded like from the strategy, once they shifted to the one stop, it felt like they were trying to set it up to have Lando be able to try to make a move right at the end or close to the end. And then the brake thing happened, and that kind of scuttled. If there was strategy, it scuttled the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, we'll never know kind of where that went. I kind of thought the same thing. I'm like, well, so what? Get through the dirty air and go pass him. Because then if there is a second stop, you get the preferred strategy. But yeah, again, it's race 2. We're going to see kind of where this goes. They're definitely way out. They're out in front. They're not way out in front, but they're out in front enough to where if they, can convert all this and actually get a gap where they will have no choice but to start fighting each other, because there won't be anybody else they'll be fighting with unless somebody else really makes a step forward in pace. All right. So that was a lot of sessions. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to re-rack. We're going to come on back, and we're going to recap what all of these sessions did to the driver standings, what it did to the team standings. We're then going to open it up to your thoughts on the weekend in the fan email segment. We've got our normal regulars all the way back this weekend. We will hand out some awards, and we will talk predictions. Our lap times kind of suffered, but we'll talk about predictions when we get there. But anyway, come on back and we'll get into all of it.